Yeah. This is our theme of this Wellington Leadership and Innovation Challenge, which we won last year. And like the idea of this PhD, what's next series is to have the speakers from different departments who are basically PhD holders and alumni who can guide us and give invaluable career guidance to the current graduate students and like let us know what all diverse options exist out there for us to do and pursue post PhD. So we are super excited to have our first speakers today, Dr. Sara Gulgas and Dr. Adam Scott Neal. And Emerson, you can take it away right now.
I'm just gonna read a little bit about each one of these awesome people. So Dr. Adam Scott Neal is a composer from Atlanta whose primary inspiration is the technology of music. From traditional instruments to computers, electronics, and toys, much of his music is for soloists and chamber ensembles, with or without electronic enhancement. He also creates fixed media audio and audiovisual works, installation, and scores for dance and film. We actually worked on a film together, so yeah, it's pretty cool. Adam earned a PhD at the University of Florida and previous degrees at Queen's University, Belfast, and Georgia State University. Adam has enjoyed nearly 300 performances of his music in 12 countries, and he currently lives in Dallas, Texas. Dr. Sara Gulgas is an assistant professor of practice at the University of Arizona's Fred Fox School of Music. She's taught courses on American popular music, the Beatles, Frank Sinatra, jazz history. Her research includes popular music studies, film and media studies, memory studies, sociology of music. Airbook in Progress, Baroque Rock and the Politics of Memory documents creation, circulation, reception, and legacy of Baroque rock through the lens of memory politics and its relation to history, postmodernism, and popular culture in the 1960s. She's presented her research as a part of the American Musicological Society and Rock Hole Lecture Series, as well as at national and international conferences. Her research on Bruce Springsteen's representation of Youngstown was published in, I don't know the acronym for this, but IASPM US, Music Scenes and Bruce Springsteen and Popular Music, Essays on Rhetoric, Social Consciousness, and Contemporary Culture. Her work on the Kinks, 8-Man, and environmental politics appeared in Resonance Interdisciplinary Music Journal. And she's also co-authored a book chapter on MTV aesthetics and the portrayal of heavy metal culture in horror films, published in Heavy Metal at the Movies. So it's awesome to have you guys. I am going to have you guys just start, each one of you, just briefly say something about what you do that maybe I didn't cover right now, and then I'll ask you another question. Can we start with Adam?
Sure. Well, I guess this might be a lot of what we talk about today, but what's not in my bio is my day job. So I work at Southern Methodist University, which is a mid-sized private university here in Dallas. And my position is assistant director of a department called the Office of Engaged Learning. So what I mostly work on is I run our undergraduate research program. So that includes research assistantships to work with professors on their projects, and we have a fellowship that students can apply for their own research projects. So I mostly work with undergrads on those programs and associated workshops and events.
Very
So
cool.
That's my day job.
Nice. Dr. Gulgas?
You can call me Sara, it's totally fine.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so you pretty much covered it in the introduction, but as assistant professor of practice, it is a career track rather than tenure track. So we could talk about that more, that might come up later. But it's essentially just like a 1-year, presumably continuing contract. And then in terms of the teaching, they're all within gen ed courses. So that's something I do as well, is pretty much focus on gen ed. So there might be music majors, but it's predominantly non-majors that I teach.
Very cool. So, what is something that you like about your job right now, and something that can be like a difficult challenge for you? So, let's stick with Sarah, and then so you guys can kind of continue back and forth.
So something I really like about my job is that I can focus on popular music courses. So obviously, as a musicologist, you're sort of trained to do, well, it was presumed that you're going to teach things like introduction to Western art music and
Yeah.
more of the classical side of things, which I was trained and completely willing to do. But my love was popular music, so it was kind of exciting that I have a job in which I can focus specifically on that, um, rather than kind of like jumping all over the place, which is nice. And that also sort of helps with my research too, because there's this nice connection between what I'm doing in the classroom versus what I'm doing for my book project, for example. I can incorporate those things pretty easily. I would say the more, however you phrased it, the more difficult parts of my job would be things like class sizes. So because I teach popular music courses, and this is something for like, I think most musicologists are aware of, but every time I would go into a job interview and I'd ask, what's the class capacity, or how many students am I expected to teach in one class, they would always say, well, for the rest of us, it's about like 20 to 30, but since you're teaching popular music, it's going to be like 150. Cool. So it's always a little difficult, particularly when you don't have, I have great grad students, great teaching assistants, but we don't have enough of them, right? So that, I would say that that's the most difficult for me.
Okay, cool. Oh, sorry, just real quick. What is it?
Mhm.
What is when I saw professor of practice? What does that mean exactly?
Yeah, so that's the well, that's a new title. That this kind of goes into the career track thing. So the our university is they just started it like the year I started, which I guess is another difficult thing because it is so new to the university, and I've been here 4 years, but it's so new to the university that nobody knows what it is and how it works. So essentially, they gave all these career track positions to different people, but we all had different titles. So they're now realizing that because everybody has a different title, then they can't figure out like what pay is fair. And so we're just all in this massive, like trying to figure out all this out together. So I actually didn't even get that before. I was just assistant professor. And then they tagged that on, I think it was last summer. So it really didn't change my position in any way. It's just, I think they're just trying to like make it equal across the disciplines. I think that's what that is.
I was thinking it was some like meditation thing or something.
I mean, it could
It's
be.
totally not what I expected you to say. Got it. Cool.
At SMU, they have these professors of practice as well, but like I found a page one time, but I forget the distinction, but there's professor of practice and there's full-time lecturer and there's adjunct and there's like all these
Yep.
different things, and it just kind of depends on how cool they think you are when they hire you. Like, you're awesome, professor of practice. Is like, oh, we could use you, adjunct.
Yeah.
Cool.
It's different at every place, I guess.
Yeah, that is.
Mhm.
Yeah, I had no idea. That's really interesting. Um, Adam, yeah. What do you like about your job? What's difficult about it? Yeah.
Yeah, so so I'm an administrator for my job, and I'm fortunate that I get to work with a lot of students who are really interesting. So I mentioned there are a lot of students who have research assistantships with their professors. I work a little more closely with what we call our engaged learning fellows. So this is a capstone grant that students can apply for. So I get to work really closely with those students. They have a faculty mentor in their discipline as well, because, well, I could not, mentor someone in chemistry or physics or something like that. People in the arts, great. But I do help people with logistical problems and just with their writing and things like that too. I do get to teach a little bit, so I co-taught a seminar on writing research proposals last semester. So working with students on that kind of thing is great. So just for food for thought for everyone here, if you like working with students, you don't have to be a professor. There are other positions in a university where you can have that interaction and make a difference outside of the classroom. So I like that I kind of stumbled into this. The difficulties, and in some ways it's kind of a fun challenge, is just navigating administration. So like I've learned so much about payroll, like the little intricacies of how, what form needs to be signed by when and all those things. So because I'm kind of a liaison between students and accounts payable and payroll. Like I can kind of help translate and say like, you're going to need to turn this in by then. I'll take care of this part because it's going to be like way over your head. And like, so it's a challenge to learn all that stuff, but it's been kind of fun. I think the true challenge is what we've all been dealing with is COVID. And like, part of my job is I have to put on events. How do I get people to come? Like, how do I make things happen? So that's been the ultimate challenge.
Gotcha. Cool. I think Yasha's going to ask a question now. Is that right? Or did I skip ahead? I don't know. I have you as the next question, so let's just go with that.
Yeah, I can just go ahead and ask one question. So I'll start with Adam because you are speaking already. I was wondering, how did you prepare yourself for this role, which you have right now, during and after your PhD? And when did you start your job?
Yes,
Adam. Yeah.
Yeah, that is a good question. So I hadn't originally planned to go into administration, but I had done administrative type of work with student organizations during my master's and PhD. And then I was involved in a couple nonprofits in Atlanta and Charlotte. So that kind of helped prepare me for this position because I had some outside experience. So I guess to wrap up the long story. So I finished my doctorate at Florida. I had a year of living at my dad's house and doing part-time jobs. Then I got a full-time job as an audio engineer at East Carolina University. That's where I met Emerson. So I was there for about 3 years, but I got really burned out on that. And my wife and I just decided we're just going to move someplace else and see what happens. So we moved to Dallas, and I just so happened to see an ad for a postdoc position in administration. Like, what is this? So I was reading the job application and it's like, okay, you're going to be helping students with research, with entrepreneurship and doing events and things like this. And I was like, I think that this was written for me because I've done a little bit of entrepreneurship with those nonprofits, and I've done some research and creative projects with my own work and, working with students and furthering along their projects. So like everything in this ad, I was like, I think this is for me. So I applied to it and just got really lucky that they tapped me to be the inaugural postdoc for this department. Then another thing happened. One of the full-time people resigned like 3 weeks after I got there. And so then they were going to post a job, and then that got delayed. And then my boss talked to her boss and they said, you know what, why don't we just reclassify Adam as assistant director? So I basically was the postdoc for 1 semester, and then I got moved up to assistant director. So I just hit my 3-year anniversary at SMU. So that's kind of like the shortest version of that story that I could come up with. But yeah, the main preparation for me was kind of being involved with stuff. So I had some kind of administrative experience that I could put on my cover letter, like, hey, I've done this and this, like I'm ready to go. And they saw that when we had the interview. They asked me things like, what's the biggest event you've ever planned? And I was like, well, I did the summer workshop for the last 3 years. I also planned a wedding. And they're like, oh, okay, well then you can handle this. What research and entrepreneurship have you done? So I was able to rattle off all those questions, and we just had a good rapport to begin with. So that's kind of how it worked out.
Nice.
Oh, that's super interesting. Yeah, I'm gonna ask same question to Sarah again. Yeah. How did you prepare for your professorship role during and after your PhD, and when did you start your job?
So I started in, August of 2018. So the thing that really prepared me, I think, was because it's a teaching heavy position. There's very little research that I'm required to do. Obviously, I do it because I want to, but because it is a teaching heavy position, I think the preparation part for me was pretty much grad school, right? And being able to teach in not only something that, again, I expected to teach in, things like Introduction to Western Art Music, but also being able to have 1 semester of Intro to World Music, or a couple semesters of working with the Beatles class, and then going on and giving me the opportunity to teach those courses on my own rather than being a teaching assistant. So there are several summers where I taught the Beatles class as instructor of record, and same thing obviously with class piano. So it was kind of nice to have that under my belt. And then kind of as Adam was saying, there was like this in-between year for me between like, because I graduated in April of 2017 and then I didn't get the job until fall of 2018. And so it was kind of that in-between period that he was talking about where like I stayed at my mom's house and was driving to Pitt because it was about an hour and a half away. So many tolls. My life was tolls. And then I also taught during the day because I would teach like the class piano at night and then, or the Beatles class. And then during the day, I taught at a K through 12 like public school doing like music classes, which didn't last very long because I knew that's not something that I wanted to do. And then also some nights I taught through a nonprofit school that, and it was from, I would go 1 hour teaching like 2nd through 4th graders, like beginning piano. And then the next hour it'd be like 50 and above, right? Ages 50 and above. So I just had to like, you know, you really learn not only different types of teaching different types of students, but you also learn how to do that very quickly. And I think that was really important, particularly for like general education, where you're not going to have music majors. In fact, most of them aren't. So being able to take these like extremely difficult concepts that, you know, to a music person is just like, oh yeah, that's easy. And having to like really think about like, well, how do I describe this to someone who's never had any experience whatsoever? And I think that really helped prepare me.
Awesome. Lorena, do you want to go with the next question?
Sure. So I guess Sarah will continue with you. And so for this next question, we're interested in hearing like what the process is, like the application process for jobs. So what was your experience applying for your job? Like, was there competition? What was the timeline like? Like, are there any expectations? And then also like, what was that interview process like? And I know, Adam, you kind of touched on some of these things, but so you can also like expand on what you said before. So let's start off with Sarah.
Oh, and I just want to say also, you can talk about other jobs, like also like
Yeah.
how many jobs you applied for and like, was it a total, you know, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm trying to remember. Jim could probably help me with this because he watched the whole thing go down. I want to say I was like on it for 3 years, or maybe it was 2 years and it seemed like 3. I honestly don't remember. But I would say like, and I guess like incorporate advice into this as I'm telling you what happened, but I would just cast your net out as wide as possible, because I think the first year I was focused, like, as one would be, it makes sense. I was focused on like, you know, fellowships, postdocs, and then jobs, obviously, hoping to get a tenure track job. And then I think the second year, and I had a few interviews within that. So there were a couple interviews. And then I think the second year, which is the year I was graduating, I think I reached out a little further to things outside of fellowships, postdocs, and like tenure track positions. So I started applying for academic advisor positions, because again, I was like really passionate about that. And then as Adam was saying, some of these were academic advisors within a music department in which I could still teach like one class, which I was kind of really excited about. And in fact, I want to say like right before I got this job, I was supposed to go to, I think it was South Dakota State, in which I was up for, like, I was like the final 3 people for that type of job, like an academic advisor within the music department, could teach some courses. So unfortunately I had to say no to that because I got this one. But yeah, so I definitely, and I had another, I think the most heartbreaking one for me was, there was one in New York City that was an academic advisor position, and they were pretty early. I think they let me know in January. I did like a round of interviews, and they were like, all right, we would like you to come to New York. And I just like had this realization that I could not afford to live in New York City with the salary that they were going to give me. And like, it's really hard when you don't have a job to say like, no, I can't do that. Like, but you just kind of have to. And I think, like I said, that was heartbreaking, and luckily it worked out, but it was just, yeah, it was not great. So I think like that's my advice, is just, you know, reach out wide as far as you can. Be thinking about like, what are you passionate about? Maybe like if you're passionate about being a professor, but like you can also find, as Adam and I are saying, like these other things that you can do in which you still get to do what you love, right? I think that's a really important thing. And I honestly don't remember what the rest of the question was. I'm really sorry. I just rambled.
I think it was the interview process. Like,
oh, interview process.
Individual interviews, like.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, every place is different. You know, you usually start out with like a phone interview, or I mean, I would assume now it's mostly Zoom interviews because we're just living in that world. But there were some of those as well. And I would say advice for that is prepare. You know, research about the university, but at the same time, you're only going to find out so much. I think that's something that I learned as well, because they only want you to know so much, right? And you're not going to necessarily know the departmental politics unless you know someone there. So just kind of do the best you can as you're going through that. And then obviously you get to the final stages of the interview where you're maybe like the last 3 people that they're interviewing. And obviously at that point, they'll usually bring you on campus. You'll do, you know, teaching demonstration, research demonstration, sit down with not only the committee, but also the dean, president, stuff like that. And so I think it's really helpful to not like prepare answers, but again, just kind of have like a general preparation of like, well, what does the dean want to hear is going to be very different than like what your colleagues want to hear, right? So I think that's like huge advice. It's just kind of like prepare, but like I said, you can only do so much.
Yeah, but I hear you saying like know your audience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, totally.
Definitely.
Yeah. Do you want to repeat the question for Adam, Lorena?
Oh, I think I got it.
Okay, cool.
Got it.
You're good. Yeah. Well, when Sarah, when you mentioned the most heartbreaking one, it made me think of of a story too. But I guess I'll start with. So I finished my PhD in 2014, and I think I applied to over the next couple years to over 200 jobs. They were mostly tenure track or visiting assistant professor, that kind of thing. So I think Sarah's advice of thinking about different roles is really smart, because that's kind of how I've found my jobs too. Like my current one is an administrator. My last one was, you know, support staff as an audio engineer. So thinking in those terms outside the box is good. What I would say, like, casting a wide net, you might want to be a little more targeted. So as a composer, traditionally we were hired to teach music theory as well, and sometimes musicology, but those disciplines have really solidified, so that way only people who have PhDs in music theory will get theory positions. Musicologists will get musicology positions. So I know a lot of you are in different disciplines, but that's where researching the school and seeing what they need, what sub-discipline they're really looking for, is going to be really important. Because I do feel like I wasted a lot of my time doing that cast the wide net advice. I applied to a lot of theory positions and I didn't have much music theory teaching experience. Most of my teaching experience was in music technology. So I got further along in those jobs, and I really should have, in retrospect, really just concentrated on those and really tried hard to get those jobs, and just not even bother with this kind of like tangentially related to my field type of job. But you know, so my current, I talked about my day job, but I do also adjunct as a professor of audio at a different institution, and I'm a part-time stage manager for the Dallas Chamber Symphony. So I have a few other things that I'm doing too that are still related to music, to what I've studied. So that's another thing you can look for too, is like if you want to have a side hustle, then especially if you end up in a metropolitan area, then you can pursue some of that too. So yeah, the heartbreaking story. So my wife's family is from Minnesota, and I got to be a finalist at a job at a small liberal arts college in Minnesota. We were really excited about that. So I went up and I did the campus interview, which was basically like, you are going to run the music technology department here. So I did a great presentation, like their whole curriculum, like here's how this class is going to go, this class is going to go. Like I thought I nailed it. And then I did the teaching demonstration, and these students really threw me some curveballs that were hard. Like they asked, well, what's your legal background? And I'm like, well, I don't have one, but I took these classes and these classes. And it turns out that I was being sabotaged. So the person who was there before was kind of kicked out and was really mad about it. And his friends sort of asked the students to ask these curveball questions that I and the other candidate apparently couldn't answer. Like, we don't have legal backgrounds, was not in the job description, but that's what that person happened to have. So anyway, the person who ended up getting the job, super well qualified, already lived in Minneapolis, so I don't begrudge him at all, but there were just some behind the scenes politics that, in a way, like, I'm disappointed I didn't get the job, but maybe politically it was better that I didn't get that. But it was kind of a heartbreak, because it was like, you know, this is after, like, this is the 200th job I've applied for or something. Really wanted to get a tenure track job, really wanted to live closer to family and all of those kind of things. And that's when we really started thinking, like, okay, we need to move out of North Carolina, go somewhere else, kind of start over. And I was just like, you know what? I'm not going to do the tenure track thing anymore. I'm going to try to go into administration. I think I'd be good at that. So then I started applying to those kind of jobs, and I really kind of changed my path. So I'm still interested in maybe professing at some place, but right now, having the day job as an administrator where I still work with students and adjuncting on the side is working fine. So that's the long rambling answer to that question.
Thank you. Wow, that was good. So final question before we open it up. So what's something you're glad you did, like, during your PhD? Because that's where I'm at. I'm like kind of towards the end, like, you know, 2/3 or more. And I just want to know, what's something you're really glad you did during your PhD, and maybe even after you're completing your degree? And then what's something, like, looking back, you're like, I could have done that better? This is for Adam.
Oh, sure. I guess what I'm glad I did was I went to a lot of conferences, and I went to some summer festivals. So for music, you're kind of expected to go to these, like, summer camps. I don't know what it's like in other disciplines, but there are a lot of these, and you have to pay, but it's a good networking opportunity. You usually get professional players to perform your music, and sometimes you get to go to Italy or whatever. So I did a few of those, but it was helpful for networking. And I went to a lot of conferences as well, so I got to network, and I think that helped, at least for getting a little further in some job interviews, because my name, like, popped up on a lot of programs, so people knew who I was at least a little bit. So that's the biggest thing. In some ways I regret it, because it's just, you have to spend so much of your own money. Like, I got some from my department, like, you know, $100 here and there, but it's like, it doesn't pay to travel across the US to go to something. But it's something you need to do. Just be strategic about it. What could I have done better? Man, I think about this constantly. I do wonder sometimes if, like, I waste too much time on the internet and things like that. Like, because in some way, there's a book called Wasting Time on the Internet that you should look up, which is great. But it's about how, like, you can read about pop culture and stuff, but you'll get ideas for other things in the background, so it's not really a waste of time. But I do feel like sometimes I could have been a little more disciplined about what I was doing, and maybe I needed some more direction, because I was doing a lot of, like, creative projects, but I wish maybe I had, like, written more papers or something like that. So I just had that, develop that side of me a little bit more. So I think just finding that balance of where I'm spending my time was what I think about a lot with my PhD. It's not like I did it poorly or anything. I still finished, but I think maybe I, like, wasted my time on some things that I could have devoted elsewhere.
That's a really good answer. Yes, Sarah, I just want to toss that over to you.
Yeah, so I definitely agree with the conferences side of things, if not only for name recognition, but as you said, professional development is huge. And even if you can find something that's more, I mean, you said the composers usually have the summer camps, but even if you can find something, if you're not a composer like me, AMS Popular Music Study Group has, like, every 2 years they have sort of a, I guess we'll call it a summer camp. I like to call it the Pop Music Summer Camp. And you get to meet all of these scholars within the field. But rather than just having more of a conference setting in which they're just kind of talking about the research, which there is a space for that, they've also been really helpful in, even before, you know, I got this job, saying, okay, well, this is how you handle balancing teaching, research, service. And I think most importantly for me is also like life in general, which I feel like most people don't talk about in a professional development type of setting, because they're just like, oh, work and life, they're together. And you're just gonna have to like space things out and how to figure it out and how to navigate that within a department. And I think that's really was important for me to see how that worked before actually going into it. And knowing once I started my job, what do I feel obligated to say yes to? What can I say no to and still have my mental sanity? I think is really important, finding something like that and then obviously having like a group of friends that went through that with you. Obviously not at the same university, but just something you can like, if you have a question or something, just being able to reach out to someone, I think that's really important. Something else that I think is like great advice in terms of just taking courses and for what you want to do through your PhD is, even if you're taking a course that you feel like has nothing to do with, because sometimes we feel like that way, right? Like I'm taking this course, this has nothing to do with what I really want to do. But I think the cool thing about grad school, and it's going to depend on the professor, obviously, is they usually give you the option to kind of, as long as it tangentially relates to the topic in some way, to sort of write about what you want to write about. And I think that helped me a lot, because once you're passionate about something, you're going to write obviously a better paper, which could turn into an article, which could turn into a book chapter. Or if it's something, there were a lot of times where I took classes and it was just like, okay, this class I'm going to write this chapter in my dissertation, and then this class I'm going to write this chapter in my dissertation, and then it just kind of all comes together rather than working against each other. Right? Like I'm going to do all these courses and then write my dissertation. That seems like a lot. Something that I wish I would have done, I don't know if it's like done differently, but something that I think is like important to think about is to not take things personally. And this is, I guess, more of like the job interview side of things, for like the reasons that Adam has described, whether you're being sabotaged or, I mean, that's pretty bad, or whatever. It's just like, sometimes you're going to go into a situation like that and you're going to have no idea. Like I did a job interview where, first of all, I will say, and you've probably already figured this out, that the job description is usually nothing what they actually want you to do. So like, I have the job description, I have in mind what I think they want me to do. And I go into this interview and it's the one where I'm like the 3 final candidates. It's not for this job, it's for a different one. And it's a small school, and I go there and I'm talking to the committee and they're like, oh yeah, you're essentially going to build this department. Like it doesn't exist yet. And I was like, oh, didn't know that. And then I go to talk with the dean and I'm just finding out this information. And I was just like, oh, well, now that I know this, these are my plans. And he's just like, oh yeah, you're not going to build the department. So sometimes like the faculty don't even like, or like the dean and the faculty don't speak to each other. They have like no idea. So like, just don't take it personally. Like, because after that, I'd sit there and be like, what could I have done differently? And I'm just like, there was no way that I could have seen that coming. Like, so just kind of like, it sucks and just move on and just roll with the punches, I guess.
Wow. This is really great. So I have some questions more, but I want to take this time to open up to anyone else. I know we have some composers in here. We have 2 composers in here. We have a couple musicologists. I don't know Jared, but if Jared wants to hop on and say something, if Jim wants to ask a question, yeah, let's open it up.
I will say that I am also a physics graduate student, but honestly, I'm just listening. There's a lot of similarities, like especially with taking courses that are not necessarily important for your specific research. But yeah, that kind of stuff translates closely over to physics and astronomy. But I mean, it's mostly I'm just here to listen.
Cool. Glad you're here.
I just want to say real quick, I have a good friend who works in our IT department, and he did his PhD in physics at SMU, and basically taught himself Python to like do the work that he needed to do. And then they needed a Python developer. And so he actually teaches a lot of courses. We collaborate with him a lot. So that's why I just wanted to point out, like, you never know what skills you're developing now might translate into something else that could be really fulfilling. Like, he really likes doing that and working with people in different disciplines, even though he's a physicist. Now he does a lot of stuff with digital humanities and things like this that are like new to him, but we're so thankful that he's around for that.
Cool. Hey, Manny. Yeah. What's up?
Hi. Thank you both for this chat. It's been great to hear your experiences. Sorry. I have a question for both Adam and Sarah. And I was thinking about this idea that, something we kind of just touched on right now, which is learning skills outside of what you went to school for. And I was wondering if each of you had any skills that you never thought that you had to learn ever, that you actually learned and you're happy you did now.
It's tough because I'm definitely a jack of all trades, master of none type of person. So like I've just dabbled in a bunch of different things. Like I've done a little bit of Python and other programming and things like that. Yeah, so I'll have to think about that a little bit. I mean, what I use a lot now is like writing. I guess I never learned graphic design, but I have to do a lot of our posters and things like that. So I've kind of like sort of taught myself the principles of that. And we use Canva. I don't know if anyone's used that, but they have tons of templates and make me look like I know what I'm doing. I could not like start in Illustrator and make something good. So that's one random one that I've just found in the last couple of years. Like I'm decent at this somehow. Never thought I would do that. I think it's good to have the couple things that you're super good at and then have some, side skills that you can just whip out and impress someone with, like, oh, you made that thing? Oh, cool. So that's what's helped me out is, oh, you can mix this audio? Oh yeah, I used to do that. Oh, you can write this? Oh yeah, I wrote a dissertation.
Yeah, it's annoying with the graphic design because I before coming to Pittsburgh, I mean, I'm not in Pittsburgh right now, I'm in Miami, but before going to Pittsburgh to do my doctorate, I had a job, an admin job, and it was never really disclosed that graphic design was needed, but my job ended up being a lot of graphic design. And before studying music, I studied graphic design in Dominican Republic, so it just happened to be okay, but it's annoying because if you remotely know anything about it, then it just falls on you to be the designer.
Yeah, I would say for me, it was just, and this is like pre-COVID because even before COVID, like when I started 18, like I said, you usually do for each semester, like 2 courses online and 2 in person. I never taught an online course before. I took like, it was just a professional development at Pitt about how to create an online course. And I'm really glad I did because I feel like I would have been completely in the dark. But then just kind of like funny side story that you don't necessarily think about. And I don't think anyone here even knows what this is because I feel like old right now. But like when they had the Zanga online journal, like, I don't know if anyone remembers it. It was like pre-MySpace. But once I started like building online content, I was just like, oh, this is like the same thing. It was just like kind of wild. And I was like, I can absolutely do this. So something that like I did as a dumb teenager, like related to, I know, way throwback, related to what I was doing now. And I thought that was just like really funny. And it kind of worked out in the end because I took like an online course once in undergrad and I absolutely hated it. And so I think in my mind, I was like, okay, that's not how to do it. And so I'll do the opposite, right? So even just like these little skills that you don't even think about will come back someday, I'm sure.
Awesome question. Oh, you want to? Oh, I saw something Adam said.
Oh, just a remark about the throwbacks. Like I was interviewed about LiveJournal because I was doing that back in 3 years ago. Anyway.
Nice.
All right. Cullen.
Yeah, Cullen was going to say. Yeah.
Hey, thank you all very much for your talk. I'm looking forward to rethinking how I could incorporate my old Tumblr into my remote instruction. So my question was kind of going off of that idea. Now that I'm starting to look at job postings and think about those job interviews for jobs that, like, even from the onset, it feels like this could go 3 or 5 different ways. It's super unclear what this job is, and I kind of just need to throw my hat in the ring. What is I appreciate your both of your kind of explanations of there's only so much preparation you can do, but could you talk about the preparation you can do, or like what are those things that you go into to be ready kind of for those questions, barring any potential sabotage, obviously. Just any thoughts that either of you have about that, I'd be really appreciate.
Well, I have heard recently that people say, like, really don't be afraid to just contact people in the department. And if they're on the search committee, they might kind of not say anything, but other people might say, what we're really looking for is an oboe teacher who can teach theory. And then, because there are a lot of music theory things that are like, oh, and teach bassoon. And it's like, we really need the bassoon teacher or something like that. So you can get some intel that way. I think the best advice I could probably give you is, if you are kind of jack of all trades and you think you would fit in one of these departments, just have a few different versions of your CV where you're emphasizing one thing or another. So if you like, I'm speaking for music, of course, but if you are a theorist and also perform, and it kind of sounds like they're looking more for a performer, maybe put that stuff first, but have another version where you're really emphasizing your theory. But also just really think through this process what do you want to do? Where are you? I think it helped clarify things for me, what I do and don't want to do. Honestly, seeing these different job ads, and I see people post about it on social media all the time, like, okay, what are they actually looking for here? Like, is this even worth applying for? Because it could be a red flag too, if it's just literally asking for everything, and you might end up building a department, but the dean doesn't know that. Maybe you don't even want to throw your hat in the ring there. Those are some scattered thoughts. Sara can fill in the rest.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. And I would say, I mean, definitely, if you can reach out to contacts, as Adam said, that's, I think, the best way to go about it. If not, and you just want to do some light research, not only in the university, but also the department as well. I think that's another thing, is I think some people just look at the university and they say, so for example, for me, it's an R1, research in university, but my position is not that. It's focused on teaching. So when I applied to the job, obviously I talked about research, but it wasn't as big of a section in my cover letter as it would be for teaching, right? I definitely put that front and center. So being able to and yeah, you essentially have to have like a crystal ball. And that's another thing, is just like, don't go crazy trying to figure it out, because I've seen examples of, maybe they do ask for a PhD in musicology, and then I will look back later just because I'm curious to see who got the position, and they have a PhD in ethnomusicology. So don't also limit yourself because you read that and you're like, oh, okay, but if you feel like, as Adam said, if you feel like it would work for you and that what you can do and what you love would contribute to the position, then apply for it. I don't think there's any reason not to.
I did want to follow up. You mentioned R1. Are you all aware of those different classifications and what an SLAC means and all that stuff?
I think I know, but I probably really don't. So I'd like to hear.
So, okay. So Research One University, it's not necessarily the biggest university, but it's the highest spending universities, basically. So they're producing the most research, getting the most grants. So the next level of that would be R2. So right now, Southern Methodist, where I am, we have about 12,000 students, and we're about evenly split between undergrads and grad students. So proportionally, we have a lot more grad students than other universities do, just proportion-wise, because we're 50-50. But we're trying to become an R1. So that means we're trying to bring in more big government grants and that kind of thing, and really pushing for more PhD students in STEM, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of talk about that at my university. Some universities might be happy being an R2 university. There's not saying that you are a bad university. It's just that your emphasis is elsewhere. So, and there are a lot of other terms too. There's regional universities and all that, and then liberal arts colleges. So you might just, I can't explain all of them, but you might read up a little bit on that to what Sara said. That way you can tailor your cover letter a little more. Because if you're applying to a liberal arts college, they care a lot more about your teaching, your relationship to students. That's what they emphasize there. They're gonna think it's cute that you research, but they want to make sure that you're an awesome teacher that's gonna like have students over to your house for coffee and things like that to make a really great experience for the students. If you're applying to an R1 university, then you want to say like, I got these huge grants and like, and by the way, I taught all these classes. So they really want to see that you're a badass researcher first. So that's where you can do just knowing what the institutions are, their basic classifications and what they emphasize. Even look at their mission statements, look at the department, what they say. That'll help guide you. But you have to tailor your cover letters, but you could basically have a few different versions for different types of institutions and then just change a few words. It's not like you have to start from scratch, but you might have 3 or 4 that you kind of like base the next one off of this. That'll help you, because people are looking for different things. Like I've heard that smaller regional schools, if they look at someone from a private university like Pitt or SMU, they'll be like, you know what, we'd rather get someone from a public school because those hoity-toity private school people, like they don't know. So Ivy League schools, they'll like automatically say no to those people. Whereas people think like, oh, if you went to Harvard, you automatically get a job. Well, maybe not at that place. So just, again, scattered thoughts to think about.
Yeah, I would also add to that, like even schools of music as well. So like, because here we're a school of music at the University of Arizona, and my undergrad was also a school of music. So I think that was another reason why they liked me, I guess, was because they knew like what to expect, that here it's going to focus more on performance and music ed, and like musicology is an afterthought. So that was kind of, I was expecting that. And that's what I went, like I said, in undergrad. So I was kind of used to it. So it's kind of those things and knowing the difference. And you'll get a general sense of the culture of the department, even though you might not know specifically that department.
Absolutely. Wow. I just learned a ton. So anyone else want to ask a question? I have a question that I can ask, but does anyone else want to step in? Okay. Oh, I just wanted to plug something that I saw that Adam did, actually. You did like a whole, like a little podcast or talk series about these kind of questions, right?
Blog series, yeah.
A blog series, yeah.
Yeah, so I interviewed people I know. Actually, like I just kind of put out a call. So there's one person that I don't actually know, and she was just interested in telling her story. But I just asked people in music and the arts what their path was, either to getting a full-time teaching job or to get tenure. So they had a lot of good advice. Like a friend of mine back in Georgia is an associate professor of viola performance now, but she really laid out like she just took meticulous notes of everything. Like if she's trying to recruit a student and she gives them a lesson, she makes a note of that. So that way she had a record of absolutely everything that she did. So if any of you get a tenure track job, you'll have to account for all that when you go up for, you'll have a review at 3 years and then at 6 years, and then they'll say whether they want to keep you or not. But all of those aspects, whether it's recruitment or service to the university, service to your field, teaching, research, it all goes, it's all accounted for there. So she's at a state university, but it has a conservatory of music. And so they really emphasized her performing. And so she put out a CD where she performed new works for viola. So that looked really impressive. It was on a record label, so it counts as a publication. That's something that those of you in the sciences, everyone understands when you publish something what that means. For those of us in the arts, it's a little, we have to kind of justify it sometimes. If we make a piece of music or a film or something, it's like, well, I made it, it's published, it was performed in public, that should count. Sometimes English professors don't understand, like, you didn't write a book, it doesn't compute. So it's just something we have to deal with a little bit to say like, I deserve tenure. I did just as much as you did. But yeah, so she had some really good advice. And yeah, so I'll put a link to my blog.
Yeah, yeah, totally plug that.
Check it out.
Yeah, so that people can check that out. I still got more. How much time do we have? Let's see. Okay, great. I do have another question. Does anyone else want to hop in? Probably maybe your last chance. Wow, this has been so cool. I guess my last question is just one about like, what was it right after you passed your dissertation defense, and like what was it before, and like was it a weird, like I've just heard people say that your mind space is really weird after that, or like you're either happy or like let down. I don't know, because I'm gonna be getting there pretty soon. I just want to know, like, what was the psychology of like that final year, like after and before?
I think the hardest thing was writing it and applying for jobs simultaneously. Although looking back on it, I feel like that was nothing in comparison to actually like having a job. But at the time it seemed really bad. And then I laughed when you said you're in a really weird mind space, because I think it was maybe the day before my dissertation defense, and we had like Daniel Goldmark come in to present something, and he was talking to me afterwards. And I was like stringing together sentences, and I thought they made sense in my head, but apparently not. And later he was just like, "Are you okay?" I was like, "I don't know. I honestly have no idea." But the defense went really well, and that was really exciting. Like when you asked if you were happy, I was extremely happy. Had really good feedback, and then then you had that gap year, right? Like of like, well, what am I going to do next? And I think that's always the hardest thing. It's like, okay, well, I have this piece of paper. That's great. What do we do with it? Right. And then you get like, the conflicting advice sometimes of different people that will say, okay, like jump in to make this a book, right? Or you have people who are like, take a break for it or from it, or you have people who say, okay, we'll take the chapters and make them into articles. And those are all like viable options, but you definitely have to like figure out what works for you. I think I took at least the summer off of like, I had like ideas of what I wanted to do, but I was just like, I just need a break. And I love the topic. It wasn't even something that like I hated and was just kind of doing. I absolutely was passionate about it. But I think you just need that separation, because, and even years later, sometimes I'll just be like, why didn't I do this? Like this would have made like so much sense, but like you just have so much experience and growth, and it makes sense now of what you can incorporate to make it even better. And I think that's an exciting thing if you view it that way.
Wow, that's cool.
Well, hopefully we'll have another question, because I don't want to end on a sad note or anything, but like I forget the exact, it was sometime in mid-March I did my defense, and it's just one of those things, like so much builds up to it, and the defense itself went fine, but I was just completely depressed after that. And I didn't like I think we went out that day to kind of celebrate, like me and my friends in my department. And then after that, I just kind of like didn't go to anything for a couple weeks. I just taught my classes and went home. And then a buddy of mine like came over to check on me. Like I was like so non-responsive. So I hope that y'all don't end up in that kind of headspace. It was a tough year. Like I was just kind of like done with my program, I think, too, by that point. So I was just not having a good time, and I was happy to be done with it, but also just like, oh, this could have been better, all those like mind games you do to yourself. So try not to close yourself off if you end up like that. Try to still go out and celebrate, like you finished a huge accomplishment. I didn't appreciate it, I think, and I didn't go to graduation or anything like that. I was just like, whatever, I'm done. So yeah, try to enjoy it, like you finished something big.
Yeah, and I'll add that to like you said, reaching out to people. I think that's absolutely huge, and just having a group of friends who have gone through the same thing or are going through the same thing, just to talk to, I think is hugely important. I had a friend at Pitt who wasn't you know, he was done with coursework and everything, and he hadn't defended yet, but he was kind of like in that limbo. And he kind of felt like he was shutting himself off. So sometimes he would just like invite me over for lunch just because he like wanted someone to talk to, right? And I think that's hugely important, is just like having a conversation. It doesn't have to be about music. It doesn't have to be about grad school, because you're probably sick of talking about it, but just like being able to talk to someone is absolutely huge because they're going through it too, right? So yeah, I think that's great advice.
Wow. I think we're, unless someone has a quick one, but I don't think we can do it. This was awesome. Wow. Yeah, I'm so glad that I decided to do this, and with our team. Thank you, Yasha. Thank you, Lorena. Thank you, Adam and Sarah. We're going to post Adam's link to those blogs so you can hear more about these kind of talks. And Sarah, if you have anything you want to plug, we can post it to our Facebook page or whatever. But it's awesome to have you guys, and thank you. Have a good semester, you too.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Yeah, totally.